Hey guys, T-Bull here. Today we got 10 tips for new battleship captains in World of Warships Legends. Got Sims on the screen here. We're going to have a game in the Tier 4 American Battleship New York playing in the background as we go over these. We got a lot to cover here, so I'm going to jump right into it. Tip number 1, my recommended line for new players would be the US Navy Battleship line. You guys are always asking me, new players to the game, ask me, what line do you think I should start out as? A cruiser, as a destroyer. For battleships, I always say the American battleships. They're pretty tanky. Yes, they're slow, but a lot of battleships are slow. That's kind of the name of the game. These are among the slowest, but they're very tanky, durable. They can survive relatively well. Guns, pretty accurate, and they're hard hitting. So I think you can learn a lot of good habits and kind of strategies that you want to be employing as a battleship commander in the American battleship line. As a kind of a add-on to that tip though, usually for players I suggest, if you want to level up all your battleships, I would say get them all to level 3 first, then all the nations to level 4, then all to level 5. Once you've gotten them up to level 5 or tier 5, you should really start to get a good feel for what each nation's lines are kind of like, how they're jiving with you and your natural play style, and you can kind of go from there. Which ones do I want to level up first at that point in time? But if you're just going to get started off and maybe you just want to focus on one line, the United States Navy battleships would be my recommendation for the new battleship players. Tip number 2, target selection. Very important in this game. Target selection for battleships, you need to be focusing on cruisers first and foremost. Each class of ship in World of Warships Legends is designed to be a hard counter to a different class. Battleships are designed to be a hard counter to cruisers. So whenever you see a cruiser and you have a good opportunity to shoot at them, you want to be taking that shot. You can see here we have a Phoenix, looks like a juicy target, so we're going to focus on him. Also destroyers, you want to be keeping an eye out for them. They are going to be keen to attack you because you are kind of the class of ship they're designed to target, so they're going to be aggressive in trying to deal with you. You're going to have to do what you can to counter them. Destroyers are not easy to hit, but you cannot be a good player in World of Warships Legends if you can't shoot destroyers, so you might as well practice early. The least important target in terms of priority, at least, is enemy battleships. They're usually going to be the hardest to remove from the game, and you want to remove the enemy's guns and ships as quickly as possible. So cruisers, the easiest for battleships to remove. That's your main priority target. If you get into a situation like we are here, where we have a destroyer attacking us, we need to defend ourselves, and we need to shoot at that ship as well. Battleships, whenever we get an opportunity for a good shot at them, we'll take it, but that's, again, our lowest priority. Tip number 3 for new battleship players: angle your armor. That is probably the most important thing for battleships. What does it mean? Pointing either the nose of your ship or the rear of your ship towards the ships that are shooting at you. That means basically when the shells hit you, they're going to be hopefully hitting these angled, sides of your ship that are basically pointing at them. The shells will skip right off. They won't be doing any damage. When ships shoot you flat in the broadside, as we just did there to the Peter on the enemy team, that's when the wicked salvos occur. That's when the massive damage happens. So we do not want to be getting shot in the side. We want to be getting shot, and we will be getting shot, but we want to absorb those salvos by having them hit us when we're basically more or less pointing at them or away from them. So right now we're angled towards that Peter. He is not angled towards us, and we are punishing him heavily. That's what you want to do as a battleship player. Tip number 4 kind of applies to all classes, but we'll talk about it in a battleship context here. Leveling up your commanders. Be careful about how much resources you put into those commanders early on. Your understanding of how the commander system works, how the relative values of each commander resource, how valuable those resources actually are. Once you get a feel for that, then you'll be able to make those decisions effectively. So you'll start off with a generic commander from each nation, and kind of like a George Dewey type commander. then there's 2 battleship-specific commanders per nation. Looking at the Americans, for instance, William Sims and Willis Lee are the 2 battleship commanders. How you can tell, their perks will say this applies to your battleship. If the perks are saying applies to cruiser or applies to destroyer, those are cruiser or destroyer commanders. That's what they're intended for anyways. Sometimes you can get creative builds with those. But anyway, commanders, be careful about how much points you put into them. I would never go above level 11 for any commanders as a new player. Once you get a lot of commanders up to level 11, then maybe you can get them up higher beyond that. But, you know, as a very new player, maybe get them up to like level 7 or 8 or 9 first. You know, maybe a few different battleship commanders from the nations that you're leveling up. Do it slow, be careful, and you won't regret your early decision making later. That's my general advice on that. Tip number 5, load AP in your guns, the armor piercing shells. Leave it in there. You're not going to see me shooting any HE, high explosive shells in this game. You're not going to see me shooting a lot of HE in most battleship games. There's some battleships that do pretty well with HE. Most of them do way better with the AP. Battleships are designed to give huge punishing salvos from time to time. You cannot do that when you have HE loaded in most ships. So to get those big booming salvos, have the AP loaded in there, and then try and figure out as you practice with the guns how to best use that AP. So for battleships, leave the HE at home. You'll thank me later. Tip number 6, create space between you and the other battleships on your team. The biggest pet peeve I have of friendly battleships on my team is when they all clump together into a big tightly wound ball. You need to create space between you and your teammates, especially the other battleships. If you want to be close to a cruiser, potentially to a destroyer that's a little bit in front of you, spotting for you, that's fine. The problem you're going to have is when all your battleships clump up, because like we talked about with angling earlier, now the enemy can angle towards all your battleships at once. That makes it very easy for them to defend themselves, very hard for you guys to give the big booming damage that you need to be doing. So create some space between you and your friendly battleships. Tip number 7, usually best to stay in open water as a battleship. There's always exceptions to every rule of thumb in this game, but in general, if you spend a lot of time near those islands, that's when those destroyers get ideas of rushing at you and ambushing you with a big juicy torpedo salvo. So to avoid that, it's best to stay moving and stay in open water. Tip number 8, another one new players ask me about quite a bit when they're watching my videos. You'll probably notice me using turret lock quite often, and that's a skill I would recommend on all classes of ships. Very important on battleships though, so if you want to use turret lock, and I strongly recommend it, go to your controller presets, change it to preset number 3 or number 4. That's when you get the option. Then how you use the lock is you figure out where you expect the target to be, either on the right or the left, either in front or behind. You lock the guns where you expect them to be needed. Then they'll begin turning so that when you need them to be ready, they're already pre-positioned and they're ready to fire. So using the turret lock and thinking 2 steps ahead on where you need those guns to be pointing will get a lot more salvos launched into the air, a lot more damage. Tip number 9, battleships are not solo ships. They're meant to be played near their teammates. You need cruisers to help support you to keep those destroyers at bay. When the destroyers pop up, the cruisers can take them out quickly. You need to be playing near your destroyers on your team. Hopefully they're staying alive long enough to do some spotting. They can find the targets for you because you have the worst concealment out of all 3 classes. The enemy can see you before you can see them. So if you're near a destroyer who has the best concealment out of all 3 classes, they'll help you spot the enemy ships. Then you can get those shells flying through the air. So battleships, if you're playing by yourself, the enemy team's going to focus you down. They're all going to shoot at you. You're going to go down very quickly. Try and stay near your team. Again, not necessarily clumped up all together in one big giant ball, but be close to them. Don't go off on your own trying to rush the enemy cap or anything crazy like that. Tip number 10, dodging torpedoes. You're going to be having a lot of torpedoes come your way as a battleship player. Destroyers love to launch torpedoes at battleships. When you get an inkling that they're coming your way, or especially if they pop up on the screen, you usually want to turn towards those torpedoes. That'll, number one, make your ship smaller, more narrow. Hopefully most of those torpedoes will miss to the right or left, but potentially you could even dodge the entire salvo completely and just slide right in between them. If you're broadside, that's when you start taking 3, 4, even 5 or more torpedoes, and then you're done. Then you're sunk. So turn in towards those torpedoes. It's a skill you're going to have to practice, but that's kind of the general idea there. Anyway, that's 10 tips for new Battleship players in World of Warships Legends. Hope you did enjoy it. If you did, please hit the thumbs up. New to the channel, consider subscribing. A lot of World of Warships coming all the time. Questions, comments, leave them below. Love to hear from you guys, and we'll see y'all later. All right, peace.